So the obsession of your character is always going to match the environments.
It's a better way to look at is that for purposes
Mhm.
of this medium that we are in right now,
Yeah,
the outlooks of the characters or their profiles, if you will, these behavioral profiles of the characters are consonant with the way the world society is presented.
I see.
It's the kind of
Interesting.
the way you look at it. And one of the important issues is whether the detective, well, first of all, the detective can like go to hell in a handbasket in terms of stability and stress.
Right.
They have a stress score that racks up, and and one of the interesting things about the police detective is, unlike all the other types of detective, they can't use compassion scenes to relieve their stress. Everybody else can,
Interesting.
yeah, but they have to
Interesting.
deal with their stress in some dysfunctional way instead. Yeah.
Right.
So I know. Um, but the deal here is that at the end, it's useful. Let's say the serial killer gets caught. But you look at the profile of the world, and pretty much everything about that world shows you why a serial killer can get away with what they do.
So the killer gets caught, but the overall outlook is still very grim.
Right. Or
Yeah.
those it's sort of thing where the detective has brought him in, but the detective is moodily wondering whether everything the serial killer said was true about the
Right.
world and society
Yeah.
and everything. And it can go the other way. I mean, maybe the killer gets away, but the detective has not been broken and
Gotcha.
sees the world, has maintained a positive view of their relationships and has, their conscience is nice and solid, that kind of thing. And of course, it can go more directly, catch the killer and things are great, killer gets away and things are rotten. I mean, that's possible too. And so it's kind of a neat game for this. The more obsessed you get, the more likely it is you can catch them, but the worse your life gets and kind of the worse the world is.
Very interesting mechanic. I like it.
Yeah, there's some neat things
Yeah.
about it. And that's
Mhm.
why, just like my life with Master, you don't strategize toward an outcome. You play hard, you advocate for your character, you try to, do the right thing as the character would do it, you do that, and then you find out where it ends up. That's
I mean,
yeah.
my life with Master isn't the Master always defeated in
Yes,
the end?
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's that's exactly it. You're not strategizing. I was talking about strategizing toward the eventual outcomes of each character, whether
Oh,
you're
right.
torn
Okay.
apart by a mob or
Yes, right.
find your integrate with the townsfolk or
Gotcha.
whatever. People who try to do that with that game or with a game like this one will find themselves floundering during play
Yeah,
because it can't really be controlled.
right.
So it's better to play your character like in a role-playing game. Who knew?
Yeah.
Right?
Who could imagine that?
Right.
Yeah.
And so yet the causality of it all for both games, and this one's a nice one for that, there's something deeply solid about it as a thematic piece, as a brutal little story at the end of this one. There's a really
Gotcha.
solid sense of, and that's what it all means. At the end, and you're like, oh shit, right?
I
Or
like it.
whatever. Yeah. So go ahead.
Is this game usually played as a one shot, like a one session
In
type,
my
or is it?
experience, it does very,
Yeah.
very well in more than one session, but it doesn't need usually more than a couple.
Okay.
The game plays very well when the supporting cast has time to breathe, and you do play through. I mean, like if in the bit we just did, you might actually have talked about, prison driver Bob, he kisses his wife that morning and goes out, and we get a pretty good look at Bob.
Right.
And who knows, whatever past peccadillo, that he might have been, his DUI from 10 years ago, or whatever
Right.
gets brought up,
Yeah.
that stuff.
Oh man.
Yeah. So so the supporting cast like really burgeons, and we can see Bob again in the ordinary role playing way, where things that we've used just sort of take on new life and new roles as we go along, however it works.
Gotcha.
So if you give the room, if you give this game room to breathe for that, it can go on for several sessions and be quite, I think, quite vivid, quite effective.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, that's one example.
Okay.
And the other one, this is a game that I like a lot, but requires, in my experience, a good sit down and a little bit of review. It's called DeGenesis. It's a German game.
Okay.
That has been published in different forms in several times. This is actually from a while ago. This was what they call the primer system. I think it's the first version that was released in English, and I don't think it lasted very long. I think it was almost more of a promotional version. So this one is a little bit different. As you'll see, I gave you a character from the Kickstart PDF from long ago who's called Deirdre, who is an apocalyptic, which is pretty much what it sounds like, post-apocalyptic punk chick. In the 80s, as I like to say, in the 80s, the future looks like the 80s. And the various things that it says on that sheet as far as her situation are not very important for our purposes.
Okay.
What matters to us is that you are a, fairly easily identified with, tattooed, dreadlocked, leather clad, denizen of the ruined world. I would say that we're talking about Deirdre in this little complex that I gave you a map of, which is actually a former U-Bahn station.
U-Bahn?
The subway, basically.
Okay.
The subway control center. And the scenario is written, I'm not using it all. I'm basically saying that Deirdre came upon somebody who was using this area to live in, kind of a safe haven in the ruined city, but that person is dead, and Deirdre is now aware, that it exists. So there's this like bolt hole where she might hide out, or basically be able to live.
Okay.
So she hasn't had much time to explore around. So I'm going to put you at in the tunnel marked number 1, where there is a metal door that's been fused and rusted shut, and another one which opens, in the second door, next to it, opens and closes, as you can see on the map. And so you're able to get in using the key that you got from the dead guy.
All right.
So that you're able to, to get in there. Getting in, if we look at what Deirdre has with her, basically,
Stiletto.
Yeah, basically you've just got a knife. You're not a very well-equipped character. I will, however, as I decided prior to this session, that you also are carrying a dose of burn, of the type that is grown in former Italy, called purgare, which is called glory, which is a particularly high quality 2. So,
okay.
Super apocalyptic drug lots and lots of uses. Really bad for you. Very good. And so basically, it's important for, Deirdre to flip this to, it's basically money in her pocket, or, it's
Okay, so she doesn't want to use it; she wants to sell it.
right. So the
Okay.
apocalyptics are very enthusiastic purveyors and distributors of burn.
Okay.
So
So the apocalyptic is like a tribe or a clan.
yeah,
or
well,
some
it's a post vampire game. Everybody's a tribe or a clan.
Okay.
Right. Whereas exactly what that means in game terms for this game isn't really for the apocalyptics. Yeah, it's kind of more of a culture that you join than something you're born into necessarily.
Okay.
And it's not very well organized, as the name might imply.
Gotcha.
So it's not like she can go to like the apocalyptic's lair and talk to the leader. That doesn't really mean very much.
Okay.
What I'm interested in is that, first of all, there's the question of you get there, and of course it's all underground, so it's super dark. But the guy lives here, so it's not like he gropes around in the dark. So what's up with that? And you don't know what's here pretty much, so you need to be kind of careful, I suppose. So question is, what do you do?
All right. So how far can I see at this point?
Well, it's actually pretty pitch. Once you get through these doors, it's pretty pitch black.
Pretty pitch black, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I would. So I have no flashlight or torch or anything like that, I assume. All I've got is the stiletto. Well, I'll feel along the walls just to get an idea of, the overall structure of the place. And I'll probably try to like stamp my foot a little bit so I get an idea of like how the, echolocation kind of thing.
All right.
And proceed on. Yeah.
So you're basically going to be very gingerly finding your way around, which is fine. So do you have any skills that will aid in this?
The only thing that looks vaguely relevant is thievery.
I think that's a really good idea, because that's exactly the sort of skill that would work here.
2d10 roll. Okay, I got a 6 and an 8. So one success.
Right. I wish, yeah. But no, I think it's more that you are going to add them together for 2 to 20.
Oh, no.
I know. Yeah, you have an 11 total, 7 plus 4. You have, I said that the difficulty is hard, which is 8.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So that's our two values, 11 and 8. And then, and let's hold off on your roll for a second, because let's look at let's hold off on the vitality just for a second.
Okay.
So the result of the skill roll is compared to both the action value and the difficulty. So the idea is that the difficulty eats up. So basically, the higher your total for your action value is good, and you want to beat the difficulty. You want to get above that difficulty. So that makes sense. It takes a second to wrap your brain around, but it actually makes sense. It's been a while since I've done this game.
Okay.
It has to be basically between a 14 and an 11. Or sorry, between an 11 and an 8.
Okay.
And so
I didn't get that.
Right. The reason, what you could do though is broaden that range of success by spending vitality. That's what you're doing by dropping the difficulty. But
gotcha.
So with that, you basically are stumbling around in the dark, when and having trouble finding your way around. To cut to the chase for purposes of our example, However,
Sure.
that means you're not going to be able to find out a few things before the marshals show up.